Hello guys, today I'll be analyzing two more companies. The first company is Oracle and the second company is Paycom. I'll analyze their financial statements and provide you with my opinion. Let's begin by firstly talking about the two companies' respective share price and their respective earnings. From Yahoo Finance, we can see that Oracle bet its second, third, and fourth quarterly earning last year. Unfortunately, it missed its first quarterly earning this year, but the estimate for its second quarterly earning this year is higher than the estimate for its second quarterly earning last year. In terms of the share price, at the beginning of the pandemic, Oracle was at 54.45 and it reached a peak of 95.94. Now the next company, Paycom bet all four of its quarterly earnings last year. And as you can see, the estimate for its first quarterly earning this year is higher than the estimate for its first quarterly earning last year. In terms of the share price, the company at the beginning of the pandemic was at 318 and it reached a peak of 547. Now let us move on to their respective financial statements. The first financial statement I'd like to analyze belongs to Oracle. And we can see from their financial statement that Oracle is in a very good financial position. The company has very high revenue, it has very high income, and it has an abundance of cash. Lastly, the company also has a very good current asset, current liability ratio. So we can see that the company is safe and it has a strong position. The only thing I'm concerned about with Oracle is whether the company is capable of expanding its profitability. Although Oracle has a very high revenue, their revenue was relatively the same during this 3-year period. And the same goes for their income. Now this may indicate that the company is no longer capable of expanding further into the current market it's operating in. If that is the case, then we as shareholders need to ask ourselves whether Oracle is capable of expanding into a new market. And from their financial statement, it seems like Oracle is more than capable of expanding into a new market Now, as I've mentioned before, the company has an abundance of cash. Perhaps the company could enter a new market via acquisition. They do have the resources to enter a new market, and hopefully they do this in the future. Now I'd like to move on to Paycom. Now, for those who don't know, Paycom is an American online payoff and human resources technology provider. And from their financial statement, we can see that the company experienced a rise in revenue from 737 million in 2020 to 1 billion in 2022. Similarly, the company experienced a rise in income from 180 million to 195 million. Now, this is a very small increase in income compared to the increase in revenue. This indicates to me that the expenses for Paycom are too large. Paycom needs to reduce its research and development expense, and most importantly, it needs to reduce its general, administrative, and sales expenses. This would lead to a rise in income, and that's something as investors we like to see. What's concerning about their financial statement is their liabilities. The company has very large current liabilities and very low long-term liabilities. This may indicate that the company has a low credit rating, and therefore they might be having a hard time in obtaining long-term loans. This is very concerning to us as long-term loans usually have higher interest rates. Short-term loans always have higher interest rates than long-term loans, and they need to be paid relatively quickly. The fact that the company has such high current liabilities and long-term liabilities also decreases their defense and makes them more vulnerable to change in the market. The next thing worth mentioning about Paycom is their income to equity ratio. Their income to equity is too small, and this indicates to me that the company has too many long-term assets. And it indicates that some of the long-term assets the company has are not generating in any cash for the company. Instead, they are holding the cash. The company could sell these long-term assets and use the cash generated from these sales in order to reduce their current liabilities. A reduction in current liabilities could potentially improve their credit rating, which would be positive news to us as investors. The company could also reduce their investment activity in order to reduce their current liabilities. That being said, their investment activity could be a necessity for the company. Perhaps the company needs to maintain their investment activity in order to continue their operations. However, if that is not the case, then I would think about reducing investment activity in order to reduce current liabilities. Before we rate the two companies, I'd like to also talk about financial activity for Paycom. Paycom initially had its financial activity at 650 million, and they reduced their financial activity to 165 million in 2022. Now this decline in financial activity may lead to a rise in share price. However, with their current financial statement, it's unlikely that the rise in share price will be significant. Finally, let us rate the two companies. I'm going to place Oracle in the OK section. As I've mentioned before, Oracle has a very strong financial statement. The company is very stable and they have an abundance of cash. The only reason I'm not placing Oracle in the buy section is because the company seems to be having a difficulty at expanding its business and increasing its profitability. If the company manages to expand further into the current market, or if they manage to enter a new market, then I'll place the company in the buy section. But for now, I'm going to place Oracle in the OK section. Paycom is going to be placed in the careful section. I am concerned about the company's liabilities. I want to see a decline in current liabilities, and I want to see the company increase its long-term liabilities. Hopefully the company manages to improve their credit rating and improve their long-term current liability ratio in the future. The other thing I'd like to see from the company is a reduction in expenses. This would increase their income, and a reduction in long-term assets would improve their income to equity ratio. If the company manages to do all of this, then I might move them to the OK section. But for now, I'm placing the company in the careful section, and they're currently leaning towards the trash section. In any case, this is all I have to say about Oracle and Paycom. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like and subscribe. And in my future videos, I plan to cover FMC, ADM, and CF. In any case, see you next time.